Would love to introduce Roz McCarthy. Roz is the founder and CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana. Roz, please take it away. Give us an introduction about yourself.
Sure. Hey, Mark. Hey, everybody on the panel this morning. I'm messed up here. I'm in Vegas, and I just arrived yesterday, so it's afternoon, but I'm still morning. So, anyways, but hi to everybody. My name is Roz McCarthy. Besides working in a blur, I'm so fortunate to be here with you today. I'm the founder and the CEO of Minorities for Medical Marijuana, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that's been focused and was established in 2016. We cover 27 different states right now. We have chapters in Toronto, in Jamaica, as well as in the UK. We have 2 historically Black college university chapters of M4MM on Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, as well as Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So as you can imagine, as you listen to Jen, and Jen is that corporation that's looking to do good, we are that corporation partner. We are that community-based organization that at the ground level, you drive cannabis, you cultivate, you guys are the ancillary businesses. We are that community kind of impact player that's getting the work done. And that's why it's so important, not only to have us on today and talking about this conversation, but talking about how you can really partner with organizations like M4MM. I'm super proud of our team, super proud of our leadership, our board of directors, our board chair, Eric Range. We have 4 different areas that we really focus on: social justice, social equity, public policy, and health and wellness. As you've seen with COVID-19, there's a huge healthcare equity gap that was shined on, a spotlight was put on it. It still exists. It exists in cannabis. It exists in other different healthcare-ish, impacted areas. And so I'm excited to not only be a part of the conversation as a advocate, but as an organization, we're going to be working hand in hand to figure out how do we change the dynamics of what we're currently seeing in communities of color. We want to participate more. We want to have access to the plant more. We want to have more support. And I think this industry, more so than any other industry I've seen in my lifetime, has the potential to do some really great things. So thank you so much for having me.
Well, thanks, Roz. And finally, but last but not least, of course, is my friend from up the road, Pribyl Dobbins, who is the CSR Corporate Social Responsibility Director for Wana Brands. Wana is one of the leading infused products companies in the United States. Katie, please tell us about you and Wana.
Well, hi there, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Sorry, I checked in a little late. I was having an internet glitch, which I think is just we're in just this bizarre time where we're all trying to be on the internet all the time. But thank you so much for having me. I am very new to Wana and the cannabis space. I've been around for about 1.5 years. Our CSR program has existed since 2018. And I have just been so thrilled with the support and the leadership at Wana in terms of prioritizing CSR efforts. So one of the big things that we are focusing on is, our tagline is enhance your life. And so how do you actually enhance your life if your basic human needs aren't being met? And so we are trying to focus our CSR efforts on organizations that support basic human services. So we're really into doing stuff around food insecurity, people experiencing homelessness, safety, and we also, I think Roz, you mentioned LPP, huge supporter of theirs. We've been really thrilled to get on board and support all of their initiatives, and just really excited for the future. And I don't know about all of you in the CSR space, but I was actually furloughed for a couple months this last spring, and my job has shifted. It does not look the same. And so I'm wondering, as we all get into what we're doing and how we're doing it, how we can also kind of flesh that out. So I would love to dig into what we have done and how this looks different now.
Well, that's great. Well, I'm glad you're back at Wana after the furlough. I wish I could say the same thing about my layoff, but that's another story that we don't need to cover. In any case, I'd like to dig into this a little bit further with the 3 of you as to the current state of CSR in the cannabis industry. We all know it's a new industry. CSR is particularly new to this industry, and how you as CSR professionals and Roz as a leading nonprofit professional are leaning in into your pillars that you've previously just described a few minutes ago. So why don't we start with Jen? Tell me a little bit more about what you think CSR looks like in the cannabis industry right now from where you sit in California at a California company, and how you're leaning into your pillars.
Sure. In terms of how we're leaning in, there has definitely been, in COVID and in response to the current reiteration of Black Lives Matter movement, has been a lean in across the company. And to be honest, it was a choice to myself and a few other staffers to quite honestly really seize that moment and look internally. And again, we're here in Sonoma County, where 1.6% of the population is from the Black community. I came to Sonoma County from Harlem, so it's something I've been very aware of. I'm a New York City public school kid, so what the makeup of Sonoma County looks like is really, always surprising to me. And I have to say, it was actually a really incredible moment. We also have to acknowledge that where the cannabis business came from, and coming out of an illicit market, you trusted your friends. And so if the co-founders of your company in a community that is 1.6% of a minority population, most likely the majority of their friends were going to look similar to them and not look like others, and not look like a more diversified community. And so this was really a great opportunity to seize and to address an issue that I think had been a topic of conversation, but not a moment of clarity that it was now, not later, not when we got a handle on this process or this thing, not when we were this much more successful or had reached this benchmark. It was now, and that we needed to move where those benchmarks and those moments were. And so to that end, I was just mentioning to Roz before we went live, starting to work with a new young incubator that is actually being spearheaded out of Florida, but is going national, and really saying, what can CannaCraft do to support, and how can we look at what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how can we do better, and what is there to learn, which is a lot. So to that end, we're doing a lot of being quiet, but actually doing the work. And I'm really excited about it. These guys are literally still getting their trademarks done. So I can't publicly speak and announce their org yet, because that's their thunder and don't want to steal it, but it's coming, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm really happy to see CannaCraft, which is so large, lean into the incubation and scholarships and potentially even bringing a new brand to the market. It was a really interesting time for us because we had just brought the Farmer and the Felon brand to market in mid-March. So that was as COVID, as stay at home was coming into place here in Northern California, we were launching our first ever CSR brand. And so that was a big deal to both get that launched in COVID and see it successful while tossing all the plans out the window, as well as then that spotlight of launching a social justice brand in the moment 6 weeks later. And one of the things that is really important to note is we chose to just give dollars as opposed to portion of proceeds. A portion of proceeds of a cannabis product is incredibly difficult to do. And I think that that's something that people forget, that how we touched the cannabis plant and what legally we're allowed to do, especially here in California, is very, very restricted. So there's if you saved something to portion of proceeds, it would be about 3 years in a flower brand before you would have recouped all of your expenses. I would have 3 years to wait for that budget and to be helping people. So we are both launching a merch line to go with it, because again, I can touch those funds way easier than I can from something touching the cannabis plant. And we're really using it as an awareness campaign and donating just directly to that org. And additionally to that, it's really been also about picking up the phone and encouraging all of our employees to sign petitions and participate and get out there if they want to get out there, and that we're going to support them.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about the Felon and the Farmer and the social equity initiatives that are taking place at CannaCraft in the next question. But that's a great foundation on where you are. Katie, from where you sit, how do you view corporate responsibility in the cannabis industry right now, and how, if you can give us some more specific examples about how WANA is leaning into your CSR pillars?
Absolutely. So I think that CSR is a huge piece of WANA, like a foundational piece of just who we are in wanting to engage with our community and be supportive of ideologies that feel very close to our hearts. And so we did begin our CSR program, of course, by doing like a survey among staff of like, what do we care about? And of course, you know, top 5 was dogs. um, which of course, like our animal family is so important, but we really, really are focusing on those basic human services that I think that all of us have accessed or needed to access or know someone who has at some point in their lives. And so the way that we have approached our CSR program is by using pretty much all of the resources that we can offer. So it's dollars, it's our time spent, it's food drives and you know, efforts in the community to be out there and get to know who's who and support everyone that we can in terms of we're in this community too, we all live here, we want to be an active participant and a good corporate citizen. And I think that leaning into that means seeking out opportunities to engage with community members as well as support community members. And while we, our CSR program looks a little different this year with COVID, you know, we can't get out and do all the volunteer projects that we were really had a great momentum going in 2019. I think we had over 600 volunteer hours by staff alone in our very first year of CSR. And this year it just looks so different. However, trying our best to still stay engaged and be as involved as impossible as the as this shift is happening. And so I think that WANA's CSR is just kind of ever evolving, although our ideology is at the root core of what we're doing. I know LPP for us has been huge, like forming that partnership and being able to get involved on a kind of a ground floor level of, you know, a little bit like Jennifer mentioned, with George Floyd's murder, with all of the murder of Black and brown people, really looking inward, you know, and kind of saying like, how are we contributing to this? What are the demographics of our company? How are we dismantling white supremacy? How are we going to be active and respectful and participate in this long overdue movement when we are especially profiting from it? So it's a big thing right now in terms for us in terms of trying to find a way that feels active and participatory as well as respectful.
Roz, a little different variation on the question simply because you're not working at a for-profit corporation in the cannabis space. You're leading a major nonprofit in the cannabis space. You know, as Katie just mentioned, they're really, while we've been talking about social equity in the cannabis industry for a number of years, really the Black Lives Matter protests and the murder of George Floyd really being the spark for those protests that frankly have been long overdue, has led to companies really leaning into diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. From where you sit, what's the status in the cannabis industry of DEI programs, and where do you see that heading?
Well, I'll tell you this. You know, when I started M4MM 2016, the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion was nowhere near where we are right now. Honestly, I had a media company, a cannabis media company, actually tell me, well, hey, there's another organization that does what you do. So you guys figure out what you're going to do. And then when you guys figure it out, I'll figure out who I'll work with, whoever rises to the top. So we've had, you know, just challenges in regards to getting buy-in. And I think, yes, the George Floyd incident, the tragedy sparked a nation, but it also sparked the industry. and to being honest. And actually, we started a change.org petition to really get the cannabis industry sparked, because honestly, prior to that petition, I didn't even see some of the cannabis companies coming out, and we should have been the first industry saying, you know, this is unacceptable. Like, you know, the policing that we see has been, there's a direct correlation to the war on drugs during that era for marijuana policing that was specifically in Black and brown communities. So that's kind of like the foundation of like where we are right now. And so, you know, my advice I look at myself as someone, as a partner with Jennifer and with Katie, and with any other CSR or any other company. The first thing first, when you ask them that question about what do you do, what's your structure, what's your focus specifically, you know, the four things that I look at for organization to, I think, start out. The first thing I will say is that you don't have to do everything in 1 year. That it's not going to be sweeping changes. It's incremental. There's going to be incremental growth. And so for anyone that wants to come and kind of slap you across the face, you're not doing enough, whatever, you have to stand strong in regards to what your foundation is, how you've organized yourself. And the things I look at, first, you get executive buy-in. Well, the fact that you have a Katie and a Jennifer that are overseeing in a position where they have to have their CEO or COO, someone had to say, I'm going to put dollars towards this initiative, and I'm committed. You need an executive from the top down to say specifically why this is important. And then, of course, having your roadmap or your pillars, prioritizing your time spent. And guess what, guys? Time spent is not only on social equity or systemic racism. There's issues with the LGBTQ community. There's veterans' corporate social responsibility issues. So your pillars should be diverse in nature, just like anything else that you do. I am more, you know, very, my heart is very specific to social equity and social justice and all those issues at hand. But I think there's an opportunity where you can do it and manage it all. What I would say to individuals that are in your position, Katie and Jennifer, is that don't be afraid to ask questions, and don't be afraid to say, I don't know what I'm doing, or I need assistance, or I need your feedback, or I need advice. Because I do think that the community organizations, and, you know, and shout out to the LPPs and you know, to marijuana policy project and some of the larger organizations. But there's some grassroots organizations that are in the community that are serving Black and brown people, that if you were to take time and make sure that if you have a program that's coming out, make sure you communicate that so that they know about it as well. Make sure that you you know, push out your messaging to so many different lanes and broadcast it, because I think people want to be connected, and they want to know, and they want to share with you what their needs are, and how your resources, your privilege, your influence, and it's not always money. So if everyone comes to you, money is important, don't get me wrong, but for example, Katie's laughing, right? I'll be calling you Katie, but no, seriously, it's not. We had someone, I'm in Las Vegas because we were working on Nevada and what's going on here in Nevada. If anybody ever knows Las Vegas, and we'll talk about that later. But long story short, we had a corporate partner that they didn't give funds. They ended up giving us 6 months of office rent for free. And so for that, that's huge for us. That's 6 months of rent I don't have to pay. It gives us a foundation for us to do what we need to do here in Las Vegas. So just know that there's so many ways to skin a cat, and I applaud you ladies on what you're doing thus far. But be okay with saying, you know what, I'm still building. We're still trying to figure it out and go from there. So.
Roz, I'm glad you mentioned about being true to who the company is, and in terms of establishing your pillars. And you know, one of the things I recommend, and I'll be doing this in the workshop at the top of the hour, which is it needs to be authentic. And so you can't just bolt on a corporate responsibility program and say we care about these three things without there being some kind of story or background or underlying mission and values and vision to that. So I'm glad you said that. For those who are on the call that aren't familiar, LPP, and we keep using that acronym, it's the Last Project, which is a nonprofit organization founded by Steve D'Angelo, and its main mission is to get cannabis offenders out of prison. Period. Full stop. There are 40,000 people in jail right now for cannabis, nonviolent offenses, and their main mission is to get them out of jail and then provide wraparound services and retraining and reentry for those people, and record expungement and clemency and things like that. So before I move into the next question, just to remind you all, there's a Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Use that if you have questions. We are going to be answering questions in a little bit. Leaning more into this social equity piece and these social equity programs, Roz, what do you think are the best practices for a company in building a social equity program? You alluded to some of them just now. But how do companies get started on a social equity program and then have a successful program that actually has meaning and ROI to it?
Yeah, I would say just really quickly, you know, social equity is such a broad topic. It's such a broad, there are so many different components to social equity and what it means. And the most important thing that you want to keep in the back of your mind is, you know, what are your outcomes and what's going to be your impact. And so whenever you figure out, okay, this is what I'm going to do, what's going to be the impact? And I mean by numbers. I mean by being able to, if you do some work with a project, that project supports one person, not saying that one person is not important, but what about if you have the opportunity to really do more and have even more impact? And so I would look at it as find one area that's well-defined that you really want to focus on. There's so many different components. There's health equity, there's social justice, there's social equity, there's workforce development. And also, you know what? And if you don't have all the resources, find someone as a consultant who can help you create a roadmap. Anybody who's out here, if you have a corporation and you're going to do CSR, you got to give these ladies a budget. Don't cheap them out. Don't, I'm telling you, don't give them budget so they can do the work. If you really believe in it, you really want them to do a good job, you really want them to be able to do it effectively, give them budget to be able to do their jobs, because they can't do it all. If you're not a subject matter expert, if you're not coming from that community, how can you also say, hey, I know it all when you don't? Because I don't know it all when it comes to cannabis. I go and call people or I hire people that can help me to do my job. And so I just think that when you build your social equity program from a corporation perspective, there's Chris Nani has a great guide that came out about social equity. Find one of those areas that you really want to focus on, drive it home. If you want to look at, you know, your internal, I would say there's two things to look at. You have your internal opportunities for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you have your external social equity where social equity is all about ownership, empowering. And so you can look at, you know, how do I want to affect people externally that are not within my organization? And that's a great way to get you started. And if you need more help, call me and I got you.
Jen, it sounds like you're having, both Jen and Katie, it sounds like you're having internal discussions around diversity, equity, and inclusion and social equity now. Jen, can you talk a little bit about what those conversations have looked like, and Katie after Jen, as well as tell us a little bit more about the Felon and the Farmer, which I find to be an amazing, fantastic brand leading into your values.
Right. So it's Farmer and the Felon, and that brand, it was really a way for co-founders to tell their stories. And what a lot of people don't necessarily know, first off, there's a misperception out there that CannaCraft is a VC funded, well-oiled, you know, corporate machine. And the truth is that we are employee and family owned and have not taken any VC funding. So when we talk about this, and to Roz's point about budget and money spent and effort and energy, it is really important to be pointing out that the other thing is we're not a federally recognized business. So while we can pay taxes, we also can't take write-offs. So when a cannabis company is making a donation, they're making a donation to make a donation. Hard stop, period. That $20,000 is 20,000 hard cash dollars. It's not coming off of a tax bill, you know, anywhere further down the line. And so I do think it's also really important that that we educate the general public on the true lift of these efforts versus, you know, CannaCraft is not Ben and Jerry's, you know, and I think that there is a little bit of thinking that it's one and the same, and that's not there. But the Farmer and the Felon is our first flower brand, so that in and of itself was really exciting. But it was also to give us a launch pad to, it's our first CSR driven brand that will always have a CSR partner. That partner will rotate. Right now it's LPP. And that was really important to us because Dennis Hunter, one of our co-founders, spent 4.5 years on the run and 6.5 years in federal prison for growing cannabis. and lost that time with his family. He was arrested and in front of his children, and removed from them. And at the same time, so this was an important issue to him from the beginning of wanting to address these issues. And so he obviously had a long history with Steve. And so when Steve reached out, it was a perfect in the moment pairing that then was actually arrived to meet this moment, right? But at the same time, the community turned and there was an expectation of what this one flower brand that had existed for 6 weeks could potentially do. And again, this was, to Roz's point of how much can you do and what is your bandwidth and how far can you go, and needing to then involve other people. So we thought that we were going to be trying to raise awareness and raise funds and be shouting from the rooftops that people needed to get involved. The moment met us, but then it was also, have you done enough? And that became a very interesting conversation, that if you're going to have a CSR brand that's focused on these issues in this moment, what are you doing? And so it became a very interesting flashpoint moment of really needing to talk about where we came from. And quite honestly, the big internal conversation with our ownership was your ability to get arrested, serve a term in federal prison, come out, and even begin to rebuild. That is our privilege. And that is why we're doing this. And acknowledging that not every person who had Dennis's experience of believing and fighting for this plant just because it was the right thing to do would get a second chance or an ability to start over. And that really became the conversation, and why we have a lot of nonprofits, partners and people who are reaching out. And again, financially, it was also an incredibly difficult moment as we were dealing with COVID and furloughing employees, as Katie mentioned. So at the same time, and now give more and do more. So we also turned and looked to alternative ways of what else we could do, which I mentioned at the top. And again, it is the launching of a merch line, which I wasn't going to do until 2021. It's going to be coming in the next 5 to 6 weeks. So again, there'll be more funds that'll be able to go directly to nonprofit partners. Those will be able to pivot more regularly. We'll be able to use that to raise awareness. We will, so I'm really excited about that coming. And again, it won't touch the plant. So I'll be able to more freely move around and do things with that. So that's really exciting there. And then the second thing that we did is very organically, I found a woman in Florida who was looking to start a BIPOC incubator and accelerator for people who just, quite honestly, in that same moment of being fed up in her life, and I'll let her tell her story, but said, I'm done, I'm starting this. And 1,500 people reached out to her in 48 hours. And I just said to her, hi, I am not your target demographic at all, but if there is something I can do to help, I'm here. And it was that organic. It was literally a DM on Twitter, and we had met weekly. We're actually getting together in person in a couple of weeks, my big first COVID outing. I'm very excited. And in January, we're going to be launching this program. And so again, it was also about stopping and saying, this is not going to be performative work. We're going to do the really hard work, and we're going to plan, and we're going to budget, and we're going to use people's time and resources. And if we don't have a person who can speak to a topic that they want to speak to internally, we're going to go out and find them and connect them. So those are kind of, in terms of meeting this moment, a few of the things that we're doing there. It was also really important to me that we also remember that there's other good work in other areas, such as sustainability, that we still need to be doing, and our environmental work. And I think one of the most incredible things about the cannabis industry right now, and why I do this work, is we get to set this foundation. We get to try to get it right out of the gate. We get to say we're here, that CSR is going to be a bedrock foundational piece of the cannabis space, so that, quite honestly, as this industry grows and changes and we try and shape it, that we've at least foundationally put in as much as we can, so that as larger companies come, you have to do this work and you have to participate. And for me, I come from a background where I was taught by Pete about the teaspoon brigade, and you just do everything that you can do little by little, and you get as many people filling that bucket, and there's a great seesaw in life, and hopefully you're going to help tip it, and so if I can't raise enough money, I've also made sure to pick up the phone. So I've spoken to 3 congressmen, one retired in the last 2 weeks, urging to get Michael Thompson out of jail. This is not a performative. We're donating money to LPP and let them go do the work. We are creating decks. I'm calling influential people to call other influential people to try to shake the cage, literally, and see if we can save some lives and really make a difference. So that's what we're doing, and hoping that it's going to work and that more people will join us.
One quick follow-up for you, Jen, and that is, have you found already, you launched the Farmer and the Felon back in late fall, early winter, I guess.
No, Farmer and the Felon actually launched in March. We announced at MJ Biz, and then but the brand itself launched in mid-March.
Have you found it selling better than some of your other cultivars or strains or brands that you have?
It has done incredibly well out of the gate. COVID, of course, there were some big tilts of plans that we could not do, right? But in general, I think that the COVID moment too of people looking to buy flower, and then I think when you go and you look, let's just be honest, at the data, people want to participate, they want to do good, and they want to do good with their dollars. So knowing that we're partnered with Lost Prisoner Project on this flower line, I think definitely has helped driven sales. And yeah, it's done incredibly well, and we're really proud of it. And, you know, to date, we have donated $20,000 to LPP. We have a target that we're going for. That was last year. We have a target that we're going for 2020. And I think we're going to meet it, and I'm excited about it. But more important than the dollars that we give them, I want these people out of jail. Yeah. And so if it's straight dollars versus 1,000 people phone banking Governor Whitmore right now, I'll take the phone bank. And so that's what we're doing. But yeah, it's been met. There have been a few questions in needing to understand where we're coming from and needing to do a better job explaining that I think COVID didn't allow us, to roll out that full narrative. But in general, it's been really well received.
Great. Katie, in terms of social equity programs and those internal discussions that you're having, both that are public facing as well as internal, what do those look like at WANA right now around social equity or DEI?
I would say that we are and have been for years in our infancy. And I think that we will, although our commitment is strong, I know that this is a forever project. This is not a checkbox. This is not a we did XYZ. This is something that we are taking on for the rest of our lives. And I think that we're expecting it to be uncomfortable. It has been here and there. We're expecting it to be messy and stressful and also productive. And we're putting some things in place in terms of, our HR specialist, requiring some really specific training for onboarding new staff and existing staff in terms of microaggressions, what's okay, what's not okay, and trying to make that as clear as possible, and also making it clear that your performance at work is important, but also how you live your life, that there's an ethics, an ethical component to people that work at WANA, and that racism, homophobia, sexism, like all of the isms are not tolerable. And so we're putting in place some trainings. We are doing some that are mandatory because we want to try and get everyone on the same page. And then we're offering a monthly voluntary group where people can get information, read books, watch a movie, get, media around oppression, pretty much of any type, even though we're largely focusing on racism right now. And just trying to gauge the climate in terms of, do our staff feel safe at work? Do they feel comfortable and supported? If they don't, what do we need to do with that? And if these ideologies that we are talking about a whole lot right now don't sit well with you, and that we're going to continue to talk about, then WANA might not be your spot.
Roz, are you getting calls for diversity, equity, and inclusion training from companies like WANA, which it sounds like they're doing trainings, and I don't know what Canacraft is, if Canacraft has been doing that as well, sensitivity trainings. Is that something that M4MM has been called upon to do, or is that something that you're available to do?
Yeah, we've received some training calls. I personally, there is a Roz M for MM, but there is a Roz Inc. So I'm actually trained through Cornell University, their e-learning. They have a diversity and inclusion program that I've been able to complete that really takes the real world DEI issue and case studies and allows you to, once you're entrenched into cannabis, being able to relate that over and translate that over to the cannabis industry. I think it's really interesting. So I think it'll give me the ability. I'm looking at 2021 to really package a program that's a training program for entities where they can facilitate it themselves, and I can either walk them through it and say, hey, I can do it, or that they can facilitate themselves. And basically it would be like an M for MM service so that I could train trainers on how to do it as well. I do think that, you have a really unique opportunity right now, not only from a CSR perspective. I really, Katie's point resonates with me, because if you don't internally make sure that you live up to the standards that you are talking about and wanting to push out programming and brands externally, those two things are not synced in, and the authenticity may not be a question right now, but a couple of years down the line. Remember, guys, legalization is going to happen. You're going to have, consumers are going to have a choice. The reason why people, and someone sent a question out, the reason why right now, no, you're not able to write off, or you're not able to balance out that write-off for a nonprofit when you make that contribution. But the opportunities of brand awareness and being able to commit yourself to a community, that it's going to pay off in spades, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years or what have you. When you have an open market, that then you're able to, now Canacraft or Warner Brand wants to come into Louisiana or into, Orlando, Florida, or into, and now you don't have to worry about crossing over state lines. How wonderful is it that you've been doing some really important work that you've already kind of, and not because you're looking to grow your business, but you've been doing it because it's the right thing to do. And so that's a beautiful thing. And literally, Katie's point is about making sure that we train our people about, aggression and diversity, equity, inclusion, and also we make sure we hold ourselves accountable inside of our corporations on our hiring practices. How many of our companies hire blind, or interview blind, where they're interviewing blindly before they're setting up that first in-person interview? It's a great way to make sure that you're being able to see someone talk, see them in person, being able to understand if they have the right resources or fit. And if you're not getting people that look like me that's in your organization, then create a mentorship program or a training program or a resume building program, or work with an organization that does that. Because you know what? Everything in cannabis is so fresh and so brand new that anything that you guys do right now is only going to be an add-on. It's only going to be a positive.
Yeah. So I take it just adding some people of color on a board of an MSO, that doesn't really cut it.
No, and not only add them onto a MS, but what about the ones that are going after licenses and they're putting people on in order just to get the license? And then once they get the license, it's really unfair, and it's very it's sad in a way to see that companies will do that. And this is not small companies. This is large MSOs who are doing it. I know it because I see it, and we have to really be better. And we have to push our colleagues to be better. And so when you have programs that Katie is putting on and Jennifer is putting on, all I ask you to do is just communicate that to the general public. If you're working on something with an organization, share it with there's other organizations who are fighting just as hard in their own way to do the same thing or something similar. And so when you're doing a program, sharing your results or sharing some of your activities or what your focus are, and saying, hey, we just want to let you guys know that we're working on this and this is really important to us. It really helps because it makes us feel like, man, we're all in this together. And people will try to kind of split us apart in regards to nonprofits. And I just want to put that out there. And I think we're doing the work and our intention and our heart is in the same place. And so we really have to bridge and come together.
We have a few minutes for questions, and we've had some come through already typed in. Please, if you have questions, please type them in. One of the first questions, and I already answered it, is it true that it does not matter what a cannabis company donates financially since there is no tax benefit? It is true that if you are a plant-touching business, there is not a tax advantage. You cannot take a tax write-off for those donations. That's true. If you're an ancillary business in the cannabis space, you can, though. And for the reasons already stated by Roz, there's a lot of other positive impact that you can have to your bottom line besides taking a tax write-off by engaging in these activities and donations.
Especially when you have, again, I'm not trying to be in anyone's pocket, but especially when you're talking about in a month, you're talking about there are some brands that are doing $1, $2, $3 million a month. And I mean, again, and you're talking about, you have some nonprofits, and remember, you have to be a 501c3. So if you're not identified as an IRS 501c3, then that even regardless, it wouldn't be a tax write-off. But there are some nonprofits that they're looking for 500. Like there's some that $500, I would go crazy. Like $500, are you serious? Great. So it's not always the amount. It doesn't have to be huge. And don't forget that your influence, Jennifer, Katie, Marc, Roz, we have influence. We have resources that these folks are looking for. And I hold myself accountable. How can I go back? I'm 4.5 years in the game. There's other smaller organizations coming up. What can I do to help them? So again, I don't want to take over too much, but I just want to kind of impress that point.
Another question we had is, and this one's, I know Roz has already answered it, but Katie and Jen, what's the minimum amount of budget that a company would have to allocate to make a difference in starting a CSR program?
There is no minimum.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much to start a CSR program. It could be, pre-COVID, a volunteer program doesn't cost you anything really, other than if you want to get some t-shirts and look nice when you go out on your volunteer day, and maybe some lost work hours that you're hopefully paying your employees to engage in. That doesn't cost much.
But you want to have a budget though. You want to,
yes.
I mean, see,
I just, and by
right.
no minimum, I just simply meant, I'm sorry, Roz.
Go ahead. No.
I just simply meant, at least in my experience, I did have a financial budget the first year at WANA, and it increased by nearly 50% the second year once I was able to show some data-driven results in terms of the effect and the impact that we had. And so I think that best case scenario, you start with what you have, and that may be your people as resources. That may be, donations from your company. That may be a food drive. That may, it may not be the $10,000 check, but I think that we get there. So you can start with whatever you have to start with. As long as you have the passion, the ideology, and the support from leadership, you start where you're at.
Yeah, you guys know from a business perspective, running a business, every year a business has their budget, and your budget is something as a whoever's the COO, or if you have a manager of a department or whatever. I used to oversee a marketing department for a $25 million a company or entity that did $25 million in revenue a year. So I was given my marketing budget. So what I mean by that is if you have a budget, if you really want CSR to really get in there and do the work that you really want to do and make an impact, you do have to have commitment from the executive team. I don't want to see anybody like just going, oh, that social equity stuff. Well, God bless you guys and do what you can do. Well, you know what? F you, because you know what? We want true, and excuse my language early today, but we want people to take this really, really serious, because this industry is built on Black and brown people that are struggling, and that we owe it to figure out how do we make an impact. And so my comment, my suggestion was, my response to that question was, it depends on if you're going to have someone that is employee that's driving it, or if you have a consultant, or if it's going to be internal where you have a committee. Because if you have a small committee, that committee is already on payroll. And so that committee is able to do small things with a small budget and go from there. And then if you have a consultant, you're able to do a little bit more with the support of that committee, and then you push out from there. Then when you have someone that's an employee that's been designated as the CSR person, Now that's their job. That's their department. Now they have a little more budget and they're able to do more. So you extrapolate that up with salary, someone's driving it, consultant, that's just someone that's a 1099 person, or an internal work group. And then you choose where you are in your budget. So if you don't have the resources for AB, but you have an internal work group, then you work with that for year 1. And then year 2, you maybe do a little bit more. And year 3, you do even more.
Yeah, those are all good points. I remember when I was interviewing for the role at Harvest, I specifically asked what the budget would be before I came in, beyond salaries of the team.
Yes.
And
yeah.
you need to have some money to get some work done. We're running out of time. So Jen, do you just want to touch on that question real quick? And
in terms of budget, our budgetary path has honestly been a little different as the ebb and the flow of the business has changed, as well as, quite honestly, some key members of my leadership changed, and there was impact there. And so in the years that I've had great budget, again, we made long-term foundational contributions to nonprofits. Again, we know that CannaCraft doesn't shift the balance all by itself, right? But we know that if we put the first rock over here and then hopefully get a whole bunch of other people to start doing the same, that we can send that down the hill. And so that's really what we look to do. If you are just getting established and there's something foundational that we can do, I might not be able to do it the second year, but that first year, that gives you that this major manufacturing company got behind you and believe in you, and we're going to raise awareness for you, and et cetera, and now go, and we're going to stay involved. That's kind of how I've navigated the change in seas of my budget in reaction to the things that the industry has been facing, whether that was COVID, the vape crisis, et cetera, and the impact that all of that legitimately does have. And then again, looking at the lack of federal legalization, functioning under 280E, where none of our operating expenses are a write-off, and that it is limiting. And so what $1 million in sales of a flower brand looks like in its first year or month is not $1 million. Right. Quite honestly, you can do all of that and have $1 million month and still have not made your money back. So again, that's not a natural A to B, and I get that that's an easy thing for somebody who's not in it to think, but it's not necessarily there when you got to keep the lights on and all the other things that are coming at the cannabis space. So that's, I've navigated it that way. And again, I went, get creative. You take whatever funds you have and you match them with people power, and then go outside of that and find partners who, the merch company I've mentioned a couple times, they're doing it with a nonprofit rate, and they're going to handle all of the funding so it can go straight. It'll never touch the cannabis manufacturing company. That was getting creative to meet a moment. And I think that that's how you can go about and do it. But of course you need buy-in from the top to make any of this work always, for sure. And that's true. The one other thing that I would say that we're doing that I'm really excited that we did that I didn't mention earlier was that we finally posted all of our jobs, the first cannabis company, on 70 million jobs, which is which is an Obama era initiative about companies that are not going to have issues with past incarcerations. Our co-founder, spent 6.5 years in federal prison, and it was something that was really important. And we're working with them on a cannabis platform that's going to get built out internally for them now as well. So that, again, that's something that doesn't cost us anything. That's time and meeting people and collaborating and looking at how can we cut this a little bit differently, and again, make space for everybody to come behind.
Unfortunately, we are at our time limit for this panel. I want to turn this back over to Ben. And for those that want to stick around, we're going to be doing a quick and dirty workshop on starting a CSR program at your company. And I see that there's some non-cannabis people also on the line. So this could be advice for even a non-cannabis professional. So Ben, take it away.
Marc, thank you so much. And Roz and Katie and Jen, wow. I attend all of these things, obviously, and it's always a privilege to listen to the experts share And really, this was something else. It just was a kind of a cut above. All of you have such a wonderful kind of vantage point from the companies that you work with and the experiences that you've had, and the, you know, Roz, you work with so many different people. It's great insight, and I think that, you know, it's reflected in the chat, and it's just I'm kind of overwhelmed. So thank you guys so much. That was really lovely. For those of you in the audience, thank you. We're going to be having, hopefully, if not all, several of these folks back with us in October with some more exciting CSR content and programming, and also more dialogue around social equity and what that really looks like in the cannabis industry and universally. So, wow, thank you to really a wonderful panel for participating and for sharing all of your insight. We are going to transition, as Marc said, to a workshop that Marc is going to lead. And so for those of you in the audience, I think this will be a great opportunity to really get some of that down and dirty on how to get started and how to jump into it. Before we do that, though, I'm going to introduce our friend Drew Emmer from our title sponsor, Boveda. They have been incredibly supportive of the Cannabis Certification Council, of our efforts with the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium, our efforts with the Organically Grown Cannabis Standard, What's in My Weed, Happy Plants. They've just been wonderful to work with. So Drew, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and tell us a little bit about Boveda here, and then we'll go back to Marc and talk more CSR.
Thank you, Ben. I just want to start by expressing our gratitude. Everybody at Boveda is committed to elevating this conversation about corporate social responsibility, and our company, while we're just really an asterisk on the cannabis industry, a small part of a hopefully a thriving and successful industry as we continue to develop technology that helps save the terps. If any, you know, I'd love to get connected to the panelists and get you guys a Save the Terps hat and any other swag that we can use to support your cause. Give your team, people on your teams, something fun to wear or to share with their friends and their families. We're really grateful for Roz and Jen and Katie, and of course, Marc, the vortex of facilitation. Thank you for taking on that responsibility. It's a real privilege for us to be involved in supporting the Cannabis Certification Council and these cannabis sustainability symposiums. We're here to be a participant, to be awake, and to be involved in the cannabis industry. We're incredibly grateful for the opportunity to support this kind of programming. We're going to continue to do that. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach out us at Boveda Cannabis on Instagram, or you can reach me directly at drew.emmer@bovedainc.com. Whatever we can do to further the conversation, to continue to elevate the subject and bring people more awareness and more consciousness about what this cannabis industry is really capable of doing to be a positive force in the world. So thanks again for allowing us to be a sponsor on this programming, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew, so much. And again, Boveda has just been an excellent partner for us and has facilitated a lot of what we're doing this year. So we're thrilled to have you, and totally pleased to have you be part of this one. So with that, we will go back to Marc Ross, who, for those of you that don't know, has a really interesting career and background, has spent his adult life as an attorney, and probably the last 20 years or so now, Marc, as a recovering attorney, my favorite kind of attorney, and has done some really amazing things outside of cannabis that I hope he'll talk about just a little bit. I won't do it for you, Marc, but he's a wonderful expert. He's been involved with some of the biggest marijuana companies in the world, helping them think through these issues. And I think that the value that our audience can get and that we'll have here in the recording is quite high with what Marc can share. And just as a preview, our intent is to have Marc come back and do more of this in the fall and in a little bit of a longer format. So with that, Marc, take it away. And don't, your time is yours. So if you want to go over a few minutes because we started late, please do so. I don't want to curtail you one iota. I'm happy to hang and listen, and we'll wrap when you're ready. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. So as I'm getting this fired up, like Ben said, I am a recovering attorney, although frankly, I'm still licensed and barred here in the state of Colorado. I've worked in the public sector as an environmental litigator for the state of Pennsylvania, in the private sector at a large law firm, and then in-house counsel to Alcoa, one of the largest, at the time, one of the largest companies in the world, as their water and remediation attorney. And then I started an environmental advocacy nonprofit organization called Rock the Earth. We worked with the entertainment industry to preserve wildlands and sue polluters and the government on behalf of rock stars and their fans, and did that for 15 years before pivoting back into the private sector and corporate responsibility. So I have a unique perspective of having worked in public, private, and nonprofit entities. And now I've had just the honor to be in the cannabis industry. Honestly, just a few years ago, in 2016, it was recommended that I pursue a career in the cannabis industry in corporate responsibility, that companies really weren't doing corporate responsibility in a very thoughtful way. And so I started to talk about it, and I started to speak at events and started to write about it. And I have a podcast also called A Better World Podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are found, where it's not a cannabis oriented podcast, although I do interview people from the cannabis industry. I have got Steve D'Angelo coming up right in a few weeks from Harborside. I have Sal Pace coming up in a couple of weeks. I just had the CSR director from Charlotte's Web. So you can get a blend of what's going on in hemp and cannabis, as well as in consumer packaged goods and food. Anyway, that's me. You can find out more about me at needleconsultants.com or abetterworldpodcast.net. So this is a presentation that I typically do over the course of 60 to 90 minutes. I'm going to jam it into 15. So I've taken out some slides and I've cut it down a bit. Again, if you have questions as we go through this, please, by all means, put them into the queue and I will be answering questions at the end. So corporate social responsibility, doing good while doing well, or otherwise known in my mind is making more money, make more money, attract and retain the best talent, enjoy community support, and differentiate your brand. So we'll go from there. This is just a definition of corporate social responsibility. For those that don't work in the field, CSR is a business approach that contributes to sustainable development by delivering economic, social, and environmental benefits to all stakeholders. By assessing the interests of all stakeholders, internal and external, thoughtful and integrated CSR plans strategically address business needs around employee engagement, community engagement, corporate philanthropy, and sustainability. So what that looks like to me, in my mind, is this Venn diagram where CSR really overlaps all of these internal and external facing stakeholders in a company. And the best programs really touch all four of these pillars, if you will. Quick exercise for those that are conscious consumers. And this is a good place to start because it starts to frame your mind in a business sense of what you can benefit from corporate responsibility. If you're looking to buy lip balm, which in Colorado is a mandatory product that you must have, apparently, at least my wife thinks so. And these two items were sitting on a shelf next to each other. Which one would you buy? And it's a rhetorical question. So I would, though, say that the conscious consumer would be buying the Burt's Bees product as opposed to just chapstick, based on a number of factors that we will talk about as we go through this process. And you can pick any items where you've got a conscious brand versus a non-conscious brand, or just a pedestrian brand on the shelf, and do the same exercise in your own mind. So why CSR? This is the business case for CSR. And you can just search ROI of CSR and find the backing that you need, the statistical backing that you need to demonstrate to other executives why there should be a CSR program. CSR programs that are done right, and I'll talk a little bit about the ones that are done right, attract the best talent. You can gain customers and customer loyalty. This is something Roz mentioned in the earlier session. Increase your revenue. This has been demonstrated that companies that do CSR right do increase their revenue over companies that don't in the same area. Reduce staff turnover. Increase productivity of your employees. Reduce employee theft and corruption. Better able to weather crisis events than companies that don't have CSR programs. You can find a lot of those statistics in Project ROI, which was a study done by Babson College in collaboration with Verizon and Campbell Soup, which is a subsidiary of Heinz. So these are not cannabis companies measuring these outcomes, but they would equally apply to the cannabis industry for thoughtful CSR programs. So the key elements to an effective CSR program, this is going back to my music industry background a little bit. I like to use this example of SIA. The best programs, the most effective programs are ones that are strategic, that are integrated, that means flowing through the entire company, that are not just bolted on as a charitable giving program, and that are authentic. In order for them to be authentic, they need to be strategic and they need to be integrated throughout the company. And they need to have buy-in from the top, as somebody had mentioned earlier. So where do you start with a CSR program? You don't just decide what charities to give money to. That's usually how CSR programs start in cannabis and outside of cannabis for small companies that don't bring in a consultant like myself or have someone that's been trained in CSR on their marketing team. They usually start either in marketing, in PR, or they start in HR, and it's usually just what we call in the CSR world confetti giving. We're going to give to these pet causes of the owner or the executive team. In cannabis, it could be we're going to give to these nonprofits because we want to get a license in that town. It could be any number of things. Someone has a sick family member. But in reality, the best programs start with a solid vision, mission, and set of values that ties it all together. It creates the foundation of what is a strategic, integrated, and authentic program. Interlude, story time. Starbucks, when they had one store in Seattle, the founders of Starbucks sat down and decided what kind of company they wanted to be. They didn't, and what I mean by that was they didn't decide that they were just going to be the largest coffee company and dominate the world coffee market. That wasn't what their vision for the world was. Their vision and their mission was to create community gathering places, and ultimately that tied into their mission as well. They wanted to create community gathering places that didn't have resources to have community centers. They wanted to, in essence, do what happens all over Europe, which is people go into coffee shops and they socialize. They go and have business meetings. They go and bring their family for family time. They go and read. They create these gathering places in parts of the country that don't have the resources for gathering places. And that really was the foundation of Starbucks, believe it or not, which gives you a different view on Starbucks from a corporate social responsibility standpoint. Vision. The vision is your view of what the world would look like if your company had maximum impact and other companies bought into your vision for the world. So it could be we want to eliminate homelessness in the world. We want every single American to have 2 hot meals a day or 2 healthy meals a day. That is a vision for a company. A vision for a company is not we're going to be the best cannabis company in the world. That's not a vision. A vision is where you put yourself in the world and how you are improving the world, your contribution to the world. I love this quote. If you don't know where you're going, you will probably end up somewhere else. It is important to have this North Star vision of where you see the world and your company's place in the world. Now, your mission, on the other hand, ties into your values and your operations and how you do business in furtherance of that vision. So here's a great example. I love using Patagonia's mission statement: build the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So this ties in their values with regard to their products and their production. It ties into how they do business, causing no unnecessary harm, and then it ties into their vision to cure the environmental crisis in the world. Very succinct. Missions don't have to be long. In fact, they should be really short. I'm hoping that we, during the Cannabis Sustainability Symposium in October, get to do an in-depth mission exercise, kind of like a CSR 301 course on how to develop your mission. But I'm also available on the side to help you do that, as well as a consultant if necessary or needed. Values. Here are some values. This is New Belgium Brewing Company, probably one of the most thoughtful breweries in the world. Again, another company that decided what kind of company they were going to be before they brewed a single barrel of beer. Kim Jordan and her business partner and husband at the time went for a hike and decided these were going to be their values. And so, typically we'll recommend that you have somewhere between 3 and 7 at tops in terms of your values, but it ties into how you, again, do business, how you see yourself in the world, how you treat stakeholders internally and externally. And this is just a good example of some values. The other thing I'll say about values is too many companies gravitate towards these kind of common values. We're going to be authentic. We're going to be, we're going to have, we're going to honor our employees. We're going to have integrity. Integrity is a great value. What the hell does that mean, integrity? We all know what it means, but how does that make you different than any other company on the planet? You want your values to really reflect your company and what makes your company special in order to proceed into an authentic corporate social responsibility program. Next, once you have your mission, vision, and values, you want to figure out who your stakeholders are, and your stakeholders are not just your customers. It is not just the nonprofits in your community that may come down on you like a ton of bricks if you are misbehaving. It is all of these elements. It's customers, dealers, distributors, it's local communities in which you operate, it's your employees, it's suppliers and partners, it's of course government and regulators, it's your shareholders, it's academia, it's competitors, research centers, ex-employees even, and industry bodies. If you can take the temperature of as many different stakeholders while you're building your CSR program, you will have a much more powerful and authentic and integrated and strategic program than you will if you just look up a bunch of nonprofits that we can give money to. And again, once you do this materiality assessment, you want to figure out where you are and where you're going, what do your stakeholders care about, and then you can create your program and your focus for your CSR pillars of where you're going. Now, talking about sustainability, sustainability often comes under corporate social responsibility. These are the main areas for sustainability. There are certainly more than this. It can include travel, it can include offices and supplies and supply chain. It can include a lot of different elements to sustainability, but these are the primary ones that folks look at for a sustainability program. Employee engagement. These are, again, some examples of what employee engagement can look like. Diversity, fair pay, work-life balance, employee benefits, volunteer opportunities. There can be an employee match or dollars for doers, which are basically matching corporate donations to volunteer time. Feedback teams, open books and financial literacy among your employees is a big one. New Belgium has an open books policy, and if you don't know how to read an income, or you don't know how to read a P&L statement or a profit and loss statement, they will teach you. They will bring people in and teach you financial literacy. Employee ownership is another key one. Very few cannabis companies are employee owned. There are a few out there. Employee appreciation awards, and of course, leading into employee engagement. We know that, for example, millennials, which are making up a large and increasing amount of the workforce want to do something more than just produce a product or service in the world. They want to engage. They want to work for companies that have CSR programs and engage communities. So that leads me into community engagement and what that can look like. It's not just giving money away. It could be utilizing space at your facility and allowing community groups to use that space. It could be opening your doors to the extent you can in the cannabis industry and provide tours that reduces, especially for the cannabis curious neighbors that may have a negative impact or a negative impression of cannabis, that can really demystify the industry and your company and help you with community relations. Preferred community hiring. Have hiring events in your community. Work with your local chamber of commerce to have hiring events of people in your community and local colleges. Of course, there's philanthropy and collaborative projects. Skills training and education is another one. Recycling events. And then, of course, sponsorship of community events is mostly what we see that cannabis companies do in terms of supporting nonprofits, but it goes well beyond that. Philanthropy. Speaking of philanthropy, there's a number of different ways that you can also engage in philanthropy than just giving money away. You can actually have a philosophy like Salesforce does, the 1-1-1 philanthropy philosophy, which is 1% of your profits, 1% of your product, and 1% of your people donating time to charity each year. There's 1% for the planet. Nonprofits that have been screened by 1% for the planet, and companies that commit to giving 1% of their profits to those organizations that have been pre-screened. It's a great charitable hub. You can create a corporate foundation, or you can create a donor-advised fund for your company, and then you can have employee matches and get your employees involved. You can even reach out to your customers and do an employee roundup program. I know the Last Prisoner Project right now is working with various companies. When I was at Harvest, we were building a register roll-up program as well to benefit another nonprofit. So there are those programs as well. Lastly, I want to touch on just an example from the cannabis space that I like to use all the time because it was one of the first companies in 2016 that I found. They had hired a consultant like myself that came from outside of cannabis to build their program, but it is really one of the best examples that I have found in cannabis, at least in 2016. There's other programs out there like CannaCraft's program and WANA's program and a bunch of other companies that are engaged in good, strategic, integrated, and authentic programs. But this was the first one I found. So Bloom Farms is a vape company out of California, and was founded by Michael Ray. And Michael came from a food insecure household. The only meal that he knew he was going to have every day was the one that he had at school. And so he decided when he was building Bloom Farms to give the company a mission that went beyond, or a purpose that went beyond just creating vapes. In cannabis, oftentimes these missions and visions are all about healthy living and cannabis and providing relief. We can do better if you want to distinguish your cannabis company, as you will see as Bloom Farms has done. So what they did was they decided that they were going to not only work on changing perceptions and safety, but they were going to create a corporate social responsibility program around access to food access, and trying to ameliorate some of the food security issues that folks had in the communities in which they operate in California. So they developed a 1-for-1 program, one meal donated for every vape sold, very similar to the Tom Shoes model, but they went beyond that. For 1 week a month, there's an employee from Bloom Farms paid by Bloom Farms to go work in a food pantry. They give money to food pantries. They help with food distribution. And so they're really leaning in hard to this food security ethos as their CSR program. And what's great about that is if you Google Bloom Farms, the first thing you're going to find is all about this program. So now they are synonymous with food security. Very few cannabis companies develop programs that are this deep, that are this strategic, this integrated through the entire company: employee engagement, community engagement, philanthropy, And this is just such a great example that I love to use. That is all I have in this quick and dirty approach to how you get started in CSR. We have a few minutes. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. And so if there are questions, please, by all means, let me know, and we'll go from there. Okay. I don't see any in the queue.
Hey, Mark, I think I know I had one. This is Ben. I know I had one in the chat. I was just curious. You mentioned employee-owned cannabis companies. That's not something I'm familiar with. I wonder, do you have an example, or can you talk about how that works?
Yeah, I feel like there's a company called District 8, I think. I believe that they offer their employees some kind of ownership. It's obviously state to state whether an employee can own a company and what ownership looks like. So it may not be true employee ownership like New Belgium Brewing Company, where every employee has a number of shares in the company. It could be for a publicly owned company. It could be stock options that are offered to everybody. It could take a number of, there's obviously hurdles in the cannabis industry and barriers to employee ownership, but there are companies out there that claim to be employee owned in the cannabis space. And it could just be the profit sharing that they take, that everybody in the company gets a portion of the profits every year if they meet their numbers. It could be something larger than that as well. Employees could be certainly surveyed for various initiatives that the company wants to undertake, to giving them more power in the company and more say in the company, which isn't technically ownership, although it goes alongside of ownership.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And it really, I think, as you pointed out, a lot of these tips are applicable for any type of business. And I think one of the interesting challenges in cannabis is, you know, the companies are always scrambling to have more stability within their ranks of employees. And it seems to me, and we heard it in the panel earlier, and then you touched on it a little bit in your presentation. I mean, having some of these elements in your business creates a higher recidivism rate, probably the wrong choice of words, but within your employees. So it just seems like common sense to me to be engaged in these kinds of practices if you're trying to build up your business.
Yeah, one of the questions that just came in is, what advice would you give to someone who is an employee looking to spearhead the company's non-existent CSR program? You know, I would say if you're an employee that's not in an executive leadership position, plan a volunteer event. I mean, it's hard to do in COVID, but there's volunteer events that you still can do, whether it's, you know, a food drive or something along those lines. In your retail store or in your manufacturing facility. At Harvest, we ended up doing a food drive with at 32 different locations, and it went across corporate headquarters or corporate regional offices as well, manufacturing, cultivation, and our retail stores. You could take that on. You could do a volunteer event that could be highway cleanup, river cleanup. It could be any number of things. But that, I would say if you're not an executive in a cannabis company, create a volunteer event is probably your easiest thing you could do. You could organize a company's participation in a run, a charity run or a charity event, marathon, anything like that, walkathon. But if you're an executive, what I would say is you want to start building your team, your cadre, your supporters. There's some great books out there on how to create a corporate social responsibility program. One of them is called 21st Century Corporate Citizenship. It was co-written by the person that created the program at Campbell's, David Stengel. And it gives all kinds of ways to start to build your team and your allies within the company. You need to have buy-in from the top. And again, you really want to build this based on a mission, vision, and values. And if the company hasn't gone through that process, it's hard as a lower level employee probably to get that going. But if you're an executive, you want to take that time to do that because those programs are the most thoughtful and have the most ROI.
Thank you, Mark. And I would think, just to go back to that question, if you are an employee and you can identify that kind of project, maybe going to your manager after you get 2 or 3 coworkers to sign up would be a good step to get some upward buy-in without needing to have all the big owners and executives sign off. Marc, thank you again so much. For those of us still with us, you should know that Marc has been a really valuable supporter of the council for several years now. He's helped us grow here in Denver. He's brought in some really wonderful speakers and resources to past symposium events. And today he was the conduit for all of our panelists. So Marc is really an indispensable person in our world, and I think someone of incredible value to the industry. So I'm personally, and we collectively, all of us who work on the council and are on the board, et cetera, are grateful to you, Marc Ross, for your support over time this year and all years. So thank you so much. With that, we are going to wrap up. Thank you to our audience for joining us. Thank you to those of you who are watching the recorded version of this. There's some great content here. We will be doing another symposium event on September 15th, and then we will be having a week-long series of events October 5th through 9th. So please stay tuned for that. We'll have more wonderful CSR content, and we'll be doing a wide array of content. We'll have multiple panels every day that week, keynotes, and lots of other fun things going on. You can always learn more at cannabiscertificationcouncil.org or cannabissustainability.org. So thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next time. Cheers.